If you like huge commanders, giant artifacts, flooding the board, card draw built into your commander, Rakdos, throwing vases at people's face, this new Modern Horizons 3 commander is probably perfect for you. This is just a working list I have right now. I'm definitely willing to take shit out. Mycosynth Golem definitely needs to go in here. 28 bucks, geez. Someone was like, Bosch Iron Golem, question mark? I was like, he's definitely going in here. So we've got 13 card draws, so that's locked in and good. Why are you running Bosch when your commander has the same ability? I don't know. Imskir is a new Modern Horizons 3 commander that is 6, a black and a red for a 5/5. He has affinity for artifacts, which means he costs 1 less to play for each artifact we control. When he enters the battlefield, we draw X cards, and we lose X life equal to the amount of artifacts we control rounded down. Okay, built-in card draw, I always like to see that. Pay 3 and a red, crack an artifact we control, deal damage to any target equal to that artifact's CMC. Converted mana cost, mana value, whatever you want to call it. So if that alone sounds interesting to you, keep watching. This deck's spicy. So the first thing we're going to talk about is affinity enablers, or just ways to flood our board with artifacts, because our commander has affinity for artifacts. If we can maintain like a high artifact level on our, or a high artifact count on our side, our commander's pretty much always going to cost like a red and a black to get out, which is super powerful. So running a bunch of stuff that's either early game artifacts or produces early game artifacts is like really useful in here. This is where I want to bring up a couple points. We run 8 cards that will produce artifacts, or like flood the board with artifacts that can come out early. You may say, that's a little low, maybe you should run like 15 of those. The only reason we're doing that is because we run mana rocks as well, and those are also artifacts. Those count towards the affinity for artifacts, and they add mana to your mana pool. Double the power for Imskir, I love that. That explains the fact we only run 8 of these cards that flood the board with artifacts. We run plenty of other small artifacts in the deck, is the reasoning behind that. And one other thing I want to bring up, treasures interact very, very well with affinity for artifacts. If you don't know, when you're casting a spell, the first thing that's happening when you cast a spell is locking in what that spell is going to be cast for. So affinity will lower the spell's mana cost. Let's say our commander cost a red and a black. We have 6 artifacts in play. And 2 of those artifacts are treasures. We can still get the affinity for artifacts reduction for those 2 treasures and crack those 2 treasures for the 2 mana that we need simultaneously. When you cast a spell, the first thing happening is you're locking in the mana cost, then you're paying for that mana cost. So you're locking it in at 1 red, 1 black. You can go ahead and crack your treasures after that and still have the affinity count going. Super good tech, so things that make treasures are especially good. We've got both Magdas in here. One of them, when they attack, you get a treasure. One of them, whenever you commit a crime, you get a treasure. One of them tutors up a dragon. One of them creates a dragon. They're just good to have, honestly. Like I just said, the treasures do double duty in here. Just making 1 or 2 treasures early is enough to get out our commander, like, way earlier than we need to. Professional Facebreaker is another one. Smack face, get treasures, turn those treasures into impulse draw. It's just a good one. Labelia, Sackville Baggins, I'll never stop repping this card. You exile a creature that went to the graveyard this turn, and you get a number of treasures equal to the CMC of that creature. And then to finish off the treasure aspect of it, we got Decadent Dragon, which doubles as impulse draw off the opponent's deck, and it's just a big dragon that makes treasures. So we also run Hangerback Walker and Retrofitter Foundry, because they're both cheap artifacts that, in the case of Hangerback Walker, when it dies, makes a bunch of 1/1 artifacts, and Retrofitter Foundry for 2 mana can just keep pumping out 1/1 artifact tokens. Very good way to get an affinity count up. And then Canaptic Scarab Swarm is one from the Warhammer decks that came out like a year ago. I can't remember how long ago this came out. My sense of time is gone. But yeah, when it comes out, you exile an opponent's graveyard. Or it might be target players. Yeah, when it comes out, you exile target player's graveyard. For each artifact or land exiled, we get a 1/1 artifact token. Again, that's going to flood the board very quickly. Make our commander cost 2 super quick. Plus, it's an artifact that we can fling with our commander. All good. All these are just ways to flood the board with artifacts early. So we can get our commander out early for one, and we can get the maximum amount of card draw we can get off the commander's trigger, which is always nice. But moving on to there, we can move into the big fling section. These are all the artifacts that we can potentially be flinging at people's faces, flinging at creatures, planeswalkers, whatever, to hopefully be trying to win the game. Koldatha Forgemaster goes here because I considered pretty much anything that was 5 or more in CMC to be a pretty sizable fling at somebody. And it just doubles as an engine that can sack 3 artifacts to tutor up an artifact, so we may just use that as an engine to tutor out big artifacts to fling, or we can fling it itself as like a cherry on top to finish someone off. I think it's just very good. Someone recommended it on stream, and I was like, that's... Mycosynth Lattice is nuts. 6 colorless. It turns everything into your hand. Turns all permanents into artifacts. All cards that aren't on the battlefield are colorless. Players may spend mana as though it were any color. Yeah, this is nuts. It's a 6-drop. You could fling it for 6 if you want. It also just makes every other permanent an artifact, so your lands as well. So our commander's always going to cost 2 when this is in play. Super good. Wormcoil Engine. Just a 6-drop, 6/6 Death Touch lifelink. When it dies, you get a 3/3 lifelink, 3/3 Death Touch. Yeah, I'll fling that for 6 and get those two 3/3s. That seems fine. Meteor Golem, Spine of Ishsal, both 7-drops that destroy something. In the case of Spine of Ishsal, when it dies, it goes back to your hand. So when we're flinging it, we can just keep reusing it. Might be one of the better cards in the deck. Mirror Battlesphere, Phyrexian Triniform, and Triplicate Titan are all like token producers that are, in the case of Phyrexian and Triplicate Titan, 9-drops. Mirror Battlesphere is a 7-drop. Really good to fling. Also really good to just produce tokens, so if they do handle our commander, he can come out cheap again. I kid you not, I'm getting good at this. I just got up because I was like, my sixth sense was like, we've hit 10 minutes. It stopped recording. I got up, looked around the camera, and it literally had just stopped recording when I looked at it. It hit the 10-minute mark. That's wild. We're feeling good. That's a win. We're stacking wins. So looking at the deck list, this is actually a good package to just talk about right now. Ancient Stone Idol, Metalwork Colossus, Mycosynth Golem, and the Cauldron of Eternity. We'll talk about each of these individually. What they are is they're 10-drop, 11-drop, 11-drop, 12-drop that all have their cost reduced by very easy factors so that we can get it out early and then fling it for a ton of damage. In the case of Ancient Stone Idol, it's a 10-drop, 12/12 with flash that costs 1 less for each attacking creature, so you can pretty much get that in very cheap. And when it dies, you get a 6/12 Golem. Again, it keeps the infinity count up. It keeps the affinity count up. It's a big thing to fling. It's just great. Metalwork costs 1 less for each artifact you control, so if we have Mycosynth Lattice in play, it'll come out for 0. 11-drop that you can fling. Sack 2 artifacts to return it back to your hand. This one's very good because we can just sack the small stuff we're making early game, get back Metalwork Colossus, play it, fling it again, sack them, get it, play it, fling it. Mycosynth Golem gives all of our stuff affinity for artifacts, and it has affinity for artifacts. Just nuts. I don't even have to explain that one. And then the Cauldron of Eternity is one that someone recommended on the stream, and I looked it up, had never seen it. Definitely a me card. I like this a lot. It's 10 and 2 black, a legendary artifact. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. With all the flinging and early game creatures that make artifacts we have, very easy. Whenever a creature you control dies, put it on the bottom of your library. Pay 2 and a black, tap it. Pay 2. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So you play this after we've already flung a couple things, and then we can just start paying 2 and a black to get that stuff back, fling it again. And it itself is a 12-drop. That'll be a cost reduced. It's very good. Great recommendation. I like that a lot. So from there, I think a good place to go is Recursion, because we're going to be flooding the board with artifacts, playing our commander, playing big artifacts, and then flinging those big artifacts, which means we're going to have a graveyard full of big stuff that we're flinging. So if we have ways to just like consistently recur this big stuff, we can keep flinging it. It's great to bring home games. So Goblin Welder and Goblin Engineer are both similar. They sack artifacts to bring back artifacts. Mirror Retriever and Scrap Trawler are both very similar. When they die, you get to bring back an artifact. In the case of Scrap Trawler, whenever any artifact you control dies, like super good in this deck. You get to bring back an artifact with less mana value. Already, Scrap Savant's fantastic. I've been waiting for a reason to run this card. 3 in a red for 3 loyalty. +2, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. -2, sack an artifact. Return an artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's like super good near. -10, you get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard, return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. If we can get the ult off, we won with the flings, which is great. Someone on stream also recommended Trash for Treasure, which is like Doretti's -2. You sack an artifact to get back an artifact. I've never heard of this card. I absolutely love it. That's fantastic. Whip of Erebos is in here to do double duty. One, it's recursion. We can get, because a lot of the artifacts we're cracking are big creatures. Whip back the big creatures, fling them again. But it also gives your creatures lifelink, so all the flinging we're doing is going to be healing us. Whip is fantastic. Very good near. And then finally, we got Feldon of the Third Path. 2 in a red, tap it, create a token that's a copy of target creature in your graveyard. Very important word. Copy, which means it still has the mana value. So yeah, we can just start making copies of stuff in the graveyard and flinging them. Feldon doesn't exile the thing out of graveyard, so we can just keep doing that with the same thing. That's busted. So outside of the straight flinging giant shit at people's face like you're King Kong, we've got like 5 cards that are enders. They're just other ways we can bring home a game. Marionette Apprentice is a new one coming out in Modern Horizons 3, which is just a small version of Marionette Master, which we also run. They fabricate and they drain people when artifacts die. With all the treasures and flinging we're doing, that'll, take some people out. Similarly with Disciple of the Vault, drains people when artifacts die. That's going to take people out. Scrap Mastery, I think, will definitely win games because we're going to have a graveyard full of huge artifact creatures, and we're going to have a board full of small artifacts, so we can sack all the artifacts we control with Scrap Mastery, return all our big stuff back into play. Our commander's not an artifact. It doesn't get sacked. We have a bunch of stuff to fling again. Everyone else does that as well. They'll probably have way more artifacts in play than they do in the graveyard, especially compared to us. So yeah, that'll win a game. And then Chisgoria. Again, I'm not in touch with like certain sets and niche releases and stuff. This was another one where someone recommended it to me, and I was like, forgot she came out. That is so goddamn good in this deck. 6 and 3 red, affinity for artifacts again. Great, love that. Flying, haste, When it attacks, exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast an artifact spell from among them. It has affinity for artifacts. Yeah, she's just gonna cheat out all big shit. We're gonna fling the big shit. And she's a 5/4 that will be bashing face with flying. Another good way to just 3-piece combo them. All right, we're going to get into the kind of boring stuff, the basics of a deck: ramp, removal, card draw, board wipes. There are timestamps on the timeline if you want to skip ahead and go into like how the deck plays and all that stuff. But if you're into this type of stuff, I'm not going to go super in depth, but I will go through the list of what we run in each section. In ramp, we've got Soul Ring, Ashnod's Altar, Cloud Key, Cursed Mirror, Foundry Inspector, Inspiring Statuary, Krark Clan Ironworks, Solemn Simulacrum, and Ugin the Ineffable. For removal, we've got Bitter Triumph, Tragic Slip, Molten Collapse, Valky God of Lies, You Find Some Prisoners, Bedevil, Guff Rewrites History, Chaos Warp, Canoptech, Scarab Swarm, Hagra's Mauling, Ugin, Noxious Gear Hulk, Spine of Ishtal, Meteor Golem. Again, we run a ton of removal because a lot of it's big artifacts that we can play that we can crack and then reuse over and over again, which is another way to win. Just remove the problems that are happening. As far as card draw, there are a lot of looters mixed in with these because putting stuff in our graveyard isn't a big deal because we have a lot of recursion. Faithless Looting, Chronomancer, Costly Plunder, Deadly Dispute, Sign in Blood, Demand Dancers, Valky, Thrill of Possibilities, Morbid Opportunist, You Find Some Prisoners, Professional Facebreaker, Decadent Dragon, and then something I do kind of want to talk about, Warren Soul Trader. This is a new one from Modern Horizons 3. I think CV recommended this on the live. Pay 1 life, sack another creature, create a treasure. A lot of our early game stuff that makes treasures and artifacts are just creatures that aren't artifacts, so we can then turn those into artifacts. That's a great one. And then as far as board wipes, we got Vandal Blast, Life's Finale, Blasphemous Act. They're like the classics I run in a deck like this. So yeah, that's the list we've came up with. I've playtested it a ton on Moxfield. It actually, I don't want to say it might be one of the stronger decks we've done on here. It is strong. It seems like it'll play very well. I'm excited to do some gameplay with that. The game plan with the deck, if you just want to sum up, I'm going to be looking over here just to kind of read off of it. Early game, we're trying to play rocks like Mind Stone, or we're trying to play stuff that creates treasures so we can get the affinity count up, so we can get the commander out as early as possible, get out Imskir as quick as possible. Since your affinity count's so high and you're running all these things that produce treasures and you're running all these mana rocks and you're running all these things that reduce the cost of artifacts, you can play these big artifacts we run for very cheap, probably in the mid game rather than the late. Mid game, we're going to be playing those big things. Mid to late game, we're going to be flinging those things, recurring those things, flinging those things, recurring those things, picking up one of those like 5 or 6 game ender pieces that can weave in there to help us bring it home. And then like we saw, like a lot of the big stuff that we play anyway, Mere Battlesphere, Triplicate Titan, they're going to be producing tokens. They are big threats on their own. They can bring home games without the fling. So we can either smack face with big things, fling, do both of those things, recur and fling, put up a defense. Like there's a lot of routes to like be okay in kind of any situation with this deck. If I had to pick a most valuable card in the deck, it would be Mycosynth Lattice. It turns all your lands into artifacts. Your commander will always cost a black and a red. It's just good. Like that's extremely well. Actually, your commander will always cost a black and a red and always draw you a ton of cards. You'll probably hit Whip of Erebos in that, and then you can start flinging, gaining the life back. It's pretty good. Here's a few test hands if you want to see them. 1, boom. 2, boom. 3, boom. I have no idea how those hands are going to look. I'm just going to do 3 random ones and throw them up there. It's been running really good, though. Here's some stats for your nerds, like CMC, mana cost, how the mana is divvied up, all that stuff. And in case you thought I wasn't going to talk about lands, we'll talk about lands a little bit. Not super in-depth, but I'll talk about them. 4 mountains, 4 swamps, sweet and simple. We run all the artifacts that we can possibly run that are artifacts, or all the lands that we can possibly run that are artifacts. Treasure Vault, Vault of Whispers, Power Depot, Drawsforge Bridge, Darksteel Citadel, all bringing up the affinity count while also bringing mana to the table and being free is nuts powerful in here. Hagra's Mauling is one to bring up because it's a modal land. It's just a removal spell, and then it's a enter tap swamp on the back. Very good. I think it's just great. It helped us. The artifact lands in the modal stuff really helped us open slots. If you want to watch the live stream of us kind of building this deck, it's either up in the corner or in the description. These lands were where it really started opening up. Like we were like, oh, this deck's going to actually be fun to build because lands are going to open up a lot of slots here. Treasure Vault is also probably another notable land. It is an artifact land, and it can tap, crack, make a bunch of artifacts, make a bunch of treasures. And like we talked about, treasures are extra good in this deck. So that land's actually putting in like triple duty there. I love that. And I just love big, old, goofy commanders, dude. So I was really excited to see this one. I've had some of my friends sending me commanders, and they're like, this is sick. I'm going to build this guy. And I've been like, man, I don't know who I'm going to build. This guy popped up. I was like, oh, yes. I've always been a super big fan of, what's his name? I have to finish this on my crappy camera where I look insane. I look crazy. All I was going to say is I've always been a fan of... can't remember his name. Boros guy that flings people. Brian Stoutarm. Boom. There we go.
Hated Boros, always hated Boros. So the fact that I can run a Rakdos deck that does essentially the same thing except with artifacts, which is a strategy I've been really digging lately, was exciting. So that's all I wanted to say. Didn't want it to just cut. Peace out. Have a good one. Later.